Hi, welcome to class. We're the only two right now, but the other ones will show up eventually, right? I hate my life. I hate my life. And Professor Sunrise Productions!
Hello class, Professor Sunrise here. I am so sorry for not uploading in quite a while, but I was just really interested in Yu-Gi-Oh! In the last few weeks. Also, there was a lot of stuff going around in my life, so I just didn't have the time for Yu-Gi-Oh! And if I don't have the time for Yu-Gi-Oh! It's hard to make videos about it, but now I'm definitely back on that grind, and today we'll be taking a look at Dragon Link post AGOV. Now that AGOV in a really big set actually has come out again, and a lot of stuff will probably happen with the metagame, and we had the first YCS, I think it's worth to explore our Dragon Link experience after AGOV. We'll be taking a look at new changes for us, like decklist wise. We'll be taking a look at the staples and the decks people are playing, and then in the end we'll take a look at the new spice which I'm cooking up, which I am super excited to share with you guys because I think this might be a very cool addition to Dragon Link and Bystial control in general. So without further ado, don't forget to seal pass on the subscribe button, leave some feedback down below, and let's get right into the video. So, Dragons post AGOV and YCS Indianapolis. Of course, we'll be taking a look at new additions to the deck, what the current matchups look like, so what are the most represented deck, current staples, and in the end, we'll be taking a look at a whole new build, which might be the new go-to. It's still a little experimental, and it seems a little weird at first, but I've done a lot of testing with it, but more on that later. So, new additions after AGOV. Little Knight, of course, absolutely goated. If you've seen the list at YCS Indianapolis, I don't think there's still like any math behind it on how many people were playing Little Knight in the top cut or in the whole event overall, but Little Knight, insanely strong card, of course. This makes Seal IP enough of an end board where I warrant I don't think you need anything else more. Maybe if you have one more non-engine or like a shit ton of follow-up with that, just Seal and IP by itself is 3 disruptions. That should be enough to get you through, especially because Seal also is 1 line of follow-up. If you add a regain to that, you will just have so many resources and so many disruptions that it's going to be super hard to break your board. The Abelsa engine, I talked about it and I theorized about it. I just don't think it's worth it to play. Summoning a fire dragon out of the deck might be decent as like a very bootleg quick launch, but the additional brick is not worth it, and Jet Synchron doesn't really offer any lines. With our level 6 and level 4 bodies, there's just not anything worthwhile to get into with the synchros. We'd much rather have a level 2 synchro to play with. Speaking about level 2s, Horus Bystial seems pretty spicy. There was a list at YCS Indianapolis. I was taking a look at it. I didn't really like it, but I built a list of just the feature match alone, which seemed pretty different, and I really like my list, and I can't wait to show it to you guys later on. Stay tuned. Let's take a look at the matchups, the most common matchups for the YCS Indianapolis and all of the other YCSs following. There will be a shit ton of Rescue. So Rescue is the deck to beat for now. It is just a really good mid-range deck. It is super consistent now thanks to the Abelsa engine. It also fixed some of the issues the deck had with an Ash on the emergency stopping their turn. Now that they have an additional way to play through that, the deck lost one of its bigger weaknesses, got the extra consistency, and even got a broken synchro place to protect their back row from Lightning Storm, Feather Dust, and stuff like that. So overall, a really good addition to the deck, which was already pretty solid before and now is really good. Unchained and Tier are a close second. Unchained, still very strong deck. It did underperform at YCS Indianapolis, I believe, at least for a deck so hyped before, but I still think it's really good. And now with people changing up their staples, preparing even more for Rescue Ace, preparing a little less for Unchained, the deck should definitely go ham. And then Tier, also close second. It's just a really good combo deck, and combo decks are probably gonna be very good right now, especially Tier, because it doesn't really lose to all of those low impact hand traps similar to other combo decks, and Tier can push through those a little better. But Unchained and Tier, we don't really care about those matchups too much because we do have a pretty good matchup against them, especially Tier. We don't really need to be scared of that coming into the meta. The more it is in the meta, the better it is for us because this matchup is just so easy for us to deal with. Purely still a problem, so you have to still respect that deck. It was the second most represented deck at YCS Indianapolis, and it shows. It's just super easy to beat this deck if you are prepared for it, but if you are not prepared for it, you will have a struggle. So it will be attacks on all of those deck lists. You probably want to commit at least 4 with the thrust package cards in your side deck, and then probably 2 to 3 more in the side deck. So it's like 7 cards in your side deck, which you basically have to play. Luckily, Thrust is one of them, so you can flex into lots of other options as well, being not that big of a problem for the side decking space, but it's just a tax you will have to pay in the format, and you will still have to just be prepared for it and how to beat it. Luckily, our matchup is decent-ish enough, so we can out-tower them as well with the Borrowland, so it is fine for us that purely is in the meta. Vanadium is super scary. Now with the new support in AGOV, the deck doesn't lose nearly as hard to Bystials like it did before. I believe the 2-card combo before couldn't play through a single Bystial. This will probably change. I will have to do lots of testing against that deck. Luckily, a few of my local players are on Vanadium, so I will be getting lots of good testing against that, and probably will do like in how to beat in like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, depending on the amount of testing I get against the deck. The next video is gonna be against Rescue Ace. Did a lot of testing against that, and the deck is pretty simple, so definitely stay tuned for that. And a few of you guys asked for it. Rescue Ace is gonna be the next deck we will be taking a deep dive in and how to beat with Dragon Link. And overall, the meta is super diverse, so while it would be reasonable and kind of easy to prepare for all of these decks, the meta still has a shit ton of other decks, being Dragon Link, Flu Wonder Reese, Labyrinth. Am I missing any of the really big ones? You got Rika, well, that's just another combo deck, but you name it. You got so many different decks. You got Chimera, you got Branded. All of them, you will probably see at some point, like if you're on a YCS, you probably will play against like 3 Rescue Ace, like 2 Unchained, a T, and then against everything else you will play like 1 round of Swiss. So it's going to be super hard to have a very cohesive deck, and you maybe will just get outlucked by opponents because you played against 2 decks which you didn't respect in deck building. It's gonna be tough, but those are the matchups you probably will have to respect the most. Now with the best matchups, or like the most common matchups in mind, let's take a look about the non-engine people are playing. Droll is probably gonna be in every deck, mainly because of Vanadium, so we will have to be preparing for that again. It was also, at least I thought it was also in every deck in the YCS Dortmund, so I did prepare for that as well. But now it's maybe even in some main decks again. Does it change a lot for our preparation? Not really. We probably will prepare a very similar way. Other than that, there will probably be still lots of low impact hand traps. Those tend to play very well into such a wide format, at least in my opinion. So going for, if you have 12 slots, Imperm, Veiler, Ash, and then Nib for side deck, for non-engine slots is really solid, because those play usually into basically everything. Most of the time you can swap out like a Nibiru or a Veiler for like other non-engine stuff, which then just hits harder. But overall, these would probably work very well. So I do expect lots of more hand traps, which is a good thing for us. Of course, we do play through low impact hand traps pretty efficiently, making them just hand trap themselves and us still ending on seal, answering their 1-card starter. And then we can usually just win afterwards because we still have lots of follow-up. With lots of low impact hand traps, of course, both triple tactic thrust and triple tactic talents will definitely still be around. Especially talents should probably get a lot more popular, just because it is really good at answering Droll. It's a really good generic going second card. So if you, for example, at least in my opinion, if I would have 15 non-engine slots right now, I would feel super fine with just playing 12 hand traps, like I said earlier, and then 3 talents in the main, just because it feels so good in such a wide format. You will have to be careful though that talents is not that great against Rescue Ace, because they do play 2 traps, so they will usually use those 2 before they will play into a talent. So you'll have to be careful for that. But if we hand trapped our Rescue Ace opponent good enough, they maybe have to force out an emergency to get the Hydroid on board so that the traps are actually good. So in the end, there's still some things you can do with talents. It's definitely not a dead card, but it's not like completely auto-broken like it is against other decks. Next thing you probably will be seeing a lot is Dweller counters. So there can be an Imperm, but they will probably see lots of droplets being like decent board breakers. So definitely expect your main monsters on the board, like Seal and IP, not to always resolve. So a droplet could definitely come out. And if your opponent starts with a spell and then they will chain droplet, like they start with like a prosperity, chain droplet, pitch some monster, now suddenly they dealt with your Seal Masquerena. There's not a lot we can do about that. It's still a very decent trade for us because they did use a few amount of their resources for that. So it's definitely something which we can live with, but still definitely expect lots of Dweller counters in the form of droplets, which is probably the only thing which really hits us. People are also playing XYZ Encore to counter Dweller. We don't really care about it that much. We don't end on an Xyz, of course, so we probably only will have to deal with the Driller at that point. And then back row hate with his Rescue Ace. I think it's very important to play at least Lightning Storm and Feather Duster in the side deck. You could even argue to play Evenly in there as well, just to answer the Rescue Ace board. Now that people are completely off the Evenly lock, I believe at least, Evenly is definitely way better against the deck again, as they have no way of countering it completely. Of course, they could have their Omni Negates up, but then you are at a point where Evenly +1 feels like the way to beat Rescue Ace. If you don't hand trap them to death, it's probably the easiest thing to do against them. Just have Evenly Lightning Storm or Feather Duster plus like an Imperm, or any way to answer the Baron or the Savage which they have on board. Sometimes I can end on both, but that's just how it is at that point, right? Quick addition from the Professor Sunrise cutting persona. Super Poly is also becoming super popular. I think the second place list of Rescue Ace did play it, and it was also in a lot of other different lists. This in combination with droplets also being somewhat popular to counter the Dweller makes committing into a Borderlord Savage even worse of a deal. Yes, Savage is really solid against the Talents, which is also probably very popular in general. It's just a very good card, of course, but in a lot of matchups you definitely don't need it. It's a huge resource investment. Think of it similar to the matchup against Runic we had, where yeah, it is alive and it's a 1-for-1 trade, but if you use 2 cards for a 1-for-1 trade, the tempo has to be very huge on that 1-for-1 trade to even be worth it. And Savage is definitely a very huge investment, and in my opinion, it's definitely not worth it to go for it right now. It plays into those droplets, it plays into the Super Polys which are alive, and more importantly, Seal and IP just got a huge boost in the SP Little line, so definitely don't commit into Savage blindly anymore. It is, in my opinion, not worth it right now, and also ties into the reason why I think the new version of Dragons, which I have been testing, is such a good call right now. So with all that, what does that mean for us? Well, we still have a decent amount of good matchups in Unchained, in Tier. Then we also have Rescue Ace in the meta, which is probably just a better mid-range deck. Overall, in a vacuum, Unchained was also stronger than us, I believe, but because we had a good matchup, so that was very manageable. But Rescue Ace, while we do have the ability to get one Bystial out, with them having a Linkaribo on the graveyard, it is definitely fine. We do have a decent matchup against the Firewall version of the deck, because we, with the one Bystial, invalidate the Firewall package kind of hard. Getting rid of that spell Trap Negate can be very crucial, especially with just such a free investment of a Bystial, but still Rescue is such a strong deck. You can beat it and you definitely have ways against it, but I still think it's just slightly better of a deck. Maybe like a 55 against 45% chance. So 55 of course for the Rescue. Definitely nothing to worry about and to like question the Dragon Link deck as a deck choice overall, but still something we have to respect and have to build our deck for. We also gotta respect Vanadium. Maybe it's just the lack of experience I have against the deck, but the deck seems super strong right now. And before, it was just I always had like one low impact hand trap, one Abyssial, and they could do nothing against that. Now it seems way better. But overall, I still think AGOV is very good for us, because we are one of the better decks at abusing SP Little Lines. Because we have Striker Dragon, we have a very easy time going second to force out SP Little Line boards. So we go for our standard Striker Dragon play, and then any extender puts immediate pressure on the opponent to basically remove the Striker Dragon, and then any additional extender goes into a Dark, and most of the times in the current meta usually force it out in SP as well. So they basically, if they only have a pop, or if they have 2 pops, they have to pop basically all of the second bodies which you put onto the board immediately, making it very easy for us to push through boards, because SP Little Line just puts up way too much pressure on the opponent going second, and we are so good at using it because we not only have a Link 1, but we also have a Dark access into our deck, or like Charmer access in general. So it seems like a very good card for us, and it will definitely help us play through simplified game states, which we were hopefully dealing with because we are playing a decent amount of hand traps. So overall, things are looking great for us. Let's take a look at a few deck lists which I have running around post AGOV. And of course also about the spicy Horus Bystial, but that will come last. So for standard Dragon Link lists, I have 2 running around. I have this one idea where I don't really want that many hand traps. This is what I was thinking about running before YCS Indianapolis happened. So we have the standard Bystial engine, but we also were playing 3 Jerusalem because I figured it was a decent call as a go second card. Just because it is alive against so many decks right now, and it does help push through boards. Problem is, I think it's not good enough against Rescue Ace because most of their board, while it's alive, most of their, or a lot of their, and way too much of their disruption is in the back row, and Jerusalem just doesn't answer them. And then Jerusalem could be good to answer a Preventer on the board, but the Preventer probably would have come out way, way earlier already. So I just don't think it was good enough against the Rescue Ace deck to warrant to play 3 of in the main deck, and I think much rather play the standard hand trap list. We are at 42 here, and I figured Talents is really good, so I wanted to play more of it. And then we just have 8 non-engine slots. If you count the Jerusalem, which I thought you could, we would be at 11 non-engine slots in 42. That's definitely fine, but I just don't think these were good enough, and I might want to change things up. But other than that, I think everything else here is pretty mandatory to play. I think I'm not a huge fan of the Caliber package right now because the Rockets, they just don't do enough currently, in my opinion, because of SP Little Knight. I just don't think we need to go for a Savage. By the way, of course, this would be an SP Little Knight. I don't know why this is not in here. So because we don't need that much seeding anymore, I just don't think it's that worth it to commit too many resources into the Tracer and into the Rockets in general. So I don't think we need to play the Caliber. Of course, you can still play it if you want to. If your meta is infested with books, it's still very good. But for now, I just don't think we need it. And then, of course, the standard black metal stuff. Samsara, absolutely goated. For me, it's mandatory to play in Dragonlink. If you don't play this, please reconsider. This card is insane. And then the Noctivision has been overperforming as well. You could even argue to play more of it, but the problem is Droll is starting to become even more popular, sometimes even in the main deck, and Noctivision just doesn't do enough against it. But I really like the ability to have it in there as a body. Really, really helps, especially on a shifter. Sometimes it can come clutch against Philwanderees to get that additional body in there so that you can end on Dissipator plus Seal under a shifter, which is very, very decent off a board already. Other than that, yeah, the non-engine, I think Nib is just too insane in Dragonlink not to play it. It is definitely alive against most of the meta. It's decent against Unchained, it's decent against Rescue Ace, it's decent against Tier, so you always get value out of it, and it's the best thing to have in your hand if you go first and just end on Seal IP. If you have a Nib with that, there's literally no way that you lose this match anymore afterwards. Imperm, also just super flexible. And then Talents. Side deck, it's basically the same side deck as I have been using after YCS Dortmund. I just think it's super clean. Branded Beast, I don't know if you really need it right now, but it's still in the side deck just because I have this one slot, and I figured searchable, back row, removal, answer just seems like the best thing to put in there. We do side 2 Baldric because Bystials are just that strong. So I figured, okay, if we don't have the Jerusalem from the side deck, we probably want to side the Baldrics against Tier. So that seems like a good idea. We play Book of Eclipse for the going first slots, which also is good against Purely. We could also think about playing Spellbound as something which is really, really good going first. And then also can be going second use as an answer against the Noir lock, because if they use the trap, we can just change that, and then they cannot use that for an XZ summon, I believe. I would assume this is how it works. So these two are basically interchangeable. Spellbound might be a little better for a YCS level, but for my locals, I still stick to the Book of Eclipse, and I don't want to buy Spellbound. So let's be real here. Side deck, extra deck is pretty standard. I have been running this one for a while now. Note that access code is a little less good now that we don't have a unicorn anymore, making Pisty into triple burst lines, which don't end on Borderland going first, even less attractive for me. I never really liked them because they just took too many resources out, because they basically made Borderland impossible to make. And now that we don't have unicorn, we have to be extra careful with that. Good thing is that we have SP now, so we are super fine with just making Seal IP a lot of times, saving this whole package for the follow-up then even more than we did before. So I think it should be fine to cut the unicorn out for the SP. You could also cut the Chaos Angel, but testing will tell how that will matter and what cards are better. The other idea I had was I wanted to play a very, very clean 40 card list. As you can see here, we don't have a Baldric in there, which is something I cut. I thought that maybe with SP you don't need the Baldric anymore off the Seal summon. This will tell. It will always came in clutch to have that card. My thought process was that the Baldric was usually just used as a battle fader, basically. Most of the time they just went battle phase and ran over it. Now that we have Seal and IP, they will probably go into the battle phase even earlier already and force out the IP that way, so the Baldrick summon doesn't even come up. So we'd much rather just summon some form of follow-up, so either a Samsara, a Safe, or a Black Metal, or an Absolouter for the next turn. So we probably don't need the Baldrick anymore, so that we have an additional space in the main deck. And then I thought, okay, with Droll in the format, I want to get as close to 40 as humanly possible. So we went to 40 actually, and cut I think 1 Black Metal out, and then we still had 10 non-engine slots. All of them are insane to draw if we get rolled. Either really good hand traps generically or high impact, or it's a talent to punish the Droll even further. And then we still have Samsara Noctivision because I do believe these are mandatory. So this is probably the deck which I will be using for the foreseeable future at locals, because I'm lacking a few cards of other things. In the side deck, it's super standard. You could argue to play more talents maybe, depending on how the meta is changing up, to answer Drolls, or maybe play a thrust target for like D-Barrier and one other trap, maybe a virus or something, to punish more decks in the format if we get Drolled. But I don't think there's a good enough thrust target against Unchained and Rescue Ace to warrant playing thrust targets. You could play a D-Barrier in there against Purely and Tier, I guess, but other than that, I don't think the thrust target is worth it. Let's take a look at the really, really spicy spice. Here we have Horus, Bystial, Dragon Link, whatever. It's called Horus Dealing. The more I played it, the more it felt like it was Horus Bystial Control, and maybe a little Synchron spiced in there. So let's take a look at the list. Best card in the deck is 3 Safer. This is just a 1-card starter into Ravine, but it's also a really, really good mill, of course, and a really good discard. And the way this deck plays, it does kind of try to turbo into Ravine and into Romulus, but because we don't have a guaranteed play afterwards, because we cannot send Absolouter and then go for like a very bad Boreal End pass, we don't put that much pressure on there and that much emphasis on it, and we just want to have it as like a very decent tool to go into, but it's definitely not like the 100% we always want to go for that. And for the rest of the Dragon package, we have Chaos Base, Insane Mill, Insane Card. We have the Chaos Dragons. We have the Levy. Really, really crucial here. We always try to use the Levy hand trip in this because of the mills with the Horus cards. We more often than not will get into that. Then we have a Samsara Dragon. Also standard, definitely very, very goated with the Ringer Worm. And then we have the Black Metal package. I wanted to have it in there just for the utility. It is a 1-card starter into Ravine, but more often than not, this will just be a utility piece, which we summon off Seal, which we search off Magnamid for follow-up. We don't really need to see this. It's just a very good dragon card in general, of course. And then lastly, we have the 1 Ringer Worm. This was the last addition I did to the deck, and I really, really helped the deck play even better, because the main game plan of this deck, and the reason you want to play this over Dragon Link, are all of the Omega hand loop lines which you can have. Problem is, if you don't draw Horus cards or Vision Resonators, like Horus into Vision Resonator or just Hard Draw Vision Resonator, it is impossible to get into Synchros or into Tuners with only Dragons. But now that we put in Ringer Worm, we can go for some Samsara Tribute Summon lines, Tribute Summon a Bystial, and then summon a Ringer Worm over the Seal, making an immediate Omega, and then we can use any extender afterwards, another Bystial or a Horus piece, and then we can use the Ringer Worm effect to get another level 2 tuner, and then make the Dispater summon back the Omega and hand loop for 2 of that. That is pretty solid, and this card has been performing really, really good. You can also just add it off a Magnamid if you resolve the Magnamid going first as a hand trap, or for follow-up plays in the turn 3 to get access into the Synchros. So I figured having a searchable tuner for dragons which actually combos off quite often is really, really good. The Seal Tribute Summon line comes up a lot of times in this list, and it's been really, really working. Then we have, for the Bystials, 3 Rebellion, 3 Saronia, 1 Magnum, 1 Druid Worm, and the Regained. Also no Baldrick, because this deck has an even higher ceiling than Dragon Link, because we usually try to hand loop for 2 to 3 and then end on Seal IP. Sometimes we end on Seal IP, Dispater, or Baron. So overall a very similar deck end board to Dragon Link, but we do have the option to go for a shit ton of hand loops. So this seems very, very solid to cut. And of course, similar reason to the other Dragon Link list, if we have Seal IP, more often than not, they will probably go into the battle phase anyway, so Baldrick is not gonna come up. Though you could make the call that Baldrick is the even better of a disruption then, but I just don't think it's necessary for this deck to function. Then we have the 3 Vision Resonators and the 1 Crimson Gaia. What this card does, if there's any level 5 or higher monster on the field, even on the opponent's side, we can just for free special summon this. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add 1 spell trap, which mentions Red Dragon Archfiend. This is going to be the Crimson Gaia. This card is just a really, really good extender. It really, really reminds you, of course, of Assault Synchron, though Assault Synchron could extend even further. And Vision Resonator has way better plays with card advantage, so it's a really good discard for Mseti, for Droplet, so I really like it that way more. So while it has the same problems as Assault Synchron, where it only really extends your 2-card combos into good 3-card combos, the additional value it offers for discards, I think, makes it better than the Assault Synchron and makes it worth playing, especially because we are lacking some sort of synchro payoff because we are not playing the Rockets. So I figured it is a very good addition to this deck, and it works out really well. Crimson Gaia just searches a Vision Resonator, or like any Resonator, I guess, on activation. We don't use any of the other effects because we don't play the Red Dragon Archfiend synchro things, which you could also play. So the Scarred Red Dragon Archfiend, Scar Red? I don't fucking know. Could be something to play for more extensions, but I didn't really use it in the lines. A lot of the lines this card comes up in are also solved by just using Exile Synchron Stardust to extend. So I think this is just not something which you need to play, but it could come up. But it's just the extra deck space is a little too tight for this package. And then lastly, the star of the show, Mseti, Glory of the Horus. This card has been performing insanely well. What this does, you discard this, or you send this, I believe, and 1 other cards for cost to the grave. Then you search a sarcophagus, and then you draw a card. So this is Supreme Ashbait, and if you get ashed on this, it's basically just as bad as getting ashed on a Chaos base. But the good thing is, if you don't get ashed on this, this card is insane, because then you get the the King Sarcophagus, you gotta draw 1, you can use the King Sarcophagus to send another Horus, and then you can make a Zombie Vampire, and the Zombie Vampire then lets you start a shit ton of plays. Milling for the opponent isn't that scary currently. Most of the time, there won't really be happening anything. If there's something happening, usually we'll have a Bystial to answer it, or at least to contest it to some degree, or we can summon it out of the opponent's graveyard if we have to and can extend. So that's not really that big of a deal. In like 15 games I did, it never really mattered that I milled something for the opponent. So all of this really, really helps you extend into your dragon plays, because Zombie Vampire has a very, very high likelihood of hitting any of the dragons. So if you squint your eyes, it's kind of like a quick launch. We don't commit our normal summon, and we get a dragon onto the board. But not only that, we also get an additional body on the board to extend, and also we get graveyard setup with Levy, Samsara, Safer, Sarania, Lubellian, Ring of Worm, Vision Rays, and all of these cards are very, very good mills. And then you have Black Metal, Red MD. It's also really good mills because we can just summon them, right? Or like a Magnemite. So like half of the deck are like really insane mills. So it's just really, really good to go into Zombie Vampire. I did the testing, and then usually in the deck there are only 1 or 2 4-card mills which are bad out of like probably at that point 8. So it's very, very consistent that you get like a very, very good mill out of them. And it's basically 100% that it's at least alive, and it gives you an additional body. So the Horus cards just really, really set up the deck. They basically act like a Chaos base in my opinion, because if this engine resolves, you are probably winning the game going first. And what's even better about this, you don't even need them going second. The Horus cards are of course insane going first. Yeah, they die kind of to an ash, but usually you can extend through that, similar to when Chaos Base gets ashed. Either you couldn't play it all anyways, or you have just a normal summon in Black Metal or Safered, and you can just continue playing afterwards. So you have that for going first, and for going second, if the opponent has an answer engine-wise, like in engine, for example, Unchained has the trap to pop the sarcophagus, we just side them out, and then we play Bystial Beatdown going second with Vision Resonators as free extenders to push into nice synchro plays with Exile Synchron, Barrow, and Dissipator, and just play through boards that way. So I've really, really been liking this way of playing dragons, and it has been working so well. I've basically only lost to my own misplays, and this has been performing so well. So definitely check it out and test it for yourself. I've been running this exact list, and it has been performing very, very well. For the non-engine, we have Droplet. A reason why I wanted to play this is because this deck can actually play Droplet, and Dragon Link it always seemed pretty bad, so I didn't really feel the need to play that. Or like, I couldn't really play that. And then we have Imperm because it's consistent, 3 talents and 1 called by, because we can still kind of get hit by an Ash. and having talents in there really helps through that. And they're also pretty generically decent, and they get the job done. Called by is pretty solid right now, in my opinion, so definitely check it out. Side deck is very similar. It does put a lot of less respect on purely, so we have to be content with that. We don't even have a Herald in here. How could I miss that? But we will probably have to do some work on the side deck, of course. But for now, this has been looking great for the extra deck. The only thing which is worth mentioning here is the Almirage. If we have to normal summon Vision Resonator, because it's our only play to get Bystials in there. I don't know if this is worth it. You might want to cut it because normal summon Vision Raider is not a play which you want to rely on anyways, so you might want to cut it, but I wouldn't know what to play over it. But other than that, this is pretty standard. 2 Seal is standard, Romulus is standard, and then all of these are pretty standard. You can still play a Unicorn, and it's the only Link 3 which we play, so we definitely want to play it. And then from the Synchros, we have Excel Synchro, which really helps to get into Baron, and then we have the Baron, of course, Dissipator, all standard, and then the star of the show, the Omega. Like I said, the only reason to play this deck, or like the only niche this deck has over Drangling, is the Omega hand loop lines it has. So these are really strong, and they are a very unique disruption, which especially work great in such a wide format, because it doesn't matter what the opponent is playing. If you're hand looping their cards, it doesn't matter what they're playing. So if they're playing low impact hand traps, this deck plays to them quite well, and they also kind of act like a self hand loop, so you don't even need to commit all too far with the hand loop, because the opponent basically hand loop themselves. And if they're playing board breakers, the hand loops are really good against them. They give you free information with the Zombie Vampire and the Omega, so that you will always be knowing what you're up against, so you can dictate your end board accordingly. Do you want a Dissipator? Do you want a Baron? So these are really good things for the deck, and it make me really want to play this deck. And I've been testing with it a lot, and I have been performing with it. Is it better than Drangling? I'm not 100% sure yet. I think it's gonna be a trade-off, because the ratios in this deck seem very similar. It's gonna be a trade-off of having a more toolboxy card and a more streamlined deck idea, and having that Ravine as like a really powerful tool, or having the more explosive high-end ceiling of the Omega hand loop, lacking just a little bit of that consistency, not from a play starting point, but from a streamlined point of always doing the same thing. With Seal IP, you could make the call that you really want to focus on that streamlined goal, because it's really good and we always want to end on it. But you could also make the call that Seal IP is strong enough that we don't need that streamlined game, and then we can fall back on Seal IP if we don't have the ability to call for the high-end ceiling Omega hand loop for 2, levy for a 3rd card, and then end on Seal IP with that. Overall, I'm really hyped again for playing a shit ton of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I want to be testing this deck out a lot. Sadly, I don't have the Horus card in real life now, so I cannot be playing it at local, but there are a lot of things to take away from this list. Also, before we end this video, I also experimented of just playing the one Ringo Worm in my normal Drangling list and playing an Omega in there as well, and still go for the Seal Tribute Summon lines. Maybe you could even just play the Vision Resonators in Drangling. This will be a lot of things to be testing, but I think Omega hand loop lines are something to take a look at in Drangling right now. Be it in this form, be it with the Ringo Worm, be it with a Ringo Worm and Vision Resonator. This will be in the stars. I hope you guys enjoyed today's class, because class is dismissed. You guys are free to leave. Professor Sunrise out. Peace.